Hi, welcome to Warrenworks. Today is another episode of my 52 cards in 52 weeks challenge. Last week I drew a 9 of diamonds which says Bandsaw mobile base. I'm going to take that up a step by building a whole new stand for my bandsaw.
I had some leftover red oak plywood from a recent job, but I don't really work with red oak too much and it's not my favorite material, so it was good to just use this up for a shop project. I can start by ripping it out on the table saw and using my crosscut sled to make sure everything is nice and square. One of the other things that I really like to use scrap lumber for is making solid edge banding. So I took a scrap of oak and ripped it down to 1/8 strips, just running those through the table saw with a push stick. When I use solid edge banding, I always use Titebond 2 because it sets up very quickly. And I use bandy clamps until I run out of them. And once I run out of bandy clamps, I'll take 2 panels and clamp them together with parallel clamps or bar clamps. And that gets nice even pressure across the whole joint as well. I usually let these sit in the clamps for about an hour before moving on. That tends to be more than enough time for Titebond 2 to set up. At least for edge banding, that's always worked just fine for me. And I always cut the edge banding just a little bit over the thickness of the plywood so I have a little bit of room to play, and then I'll just clean that up with a hand plane followed by some sanding. I find that my Dozuki Japanese saw does a really good job at flush trimming the ends of the edge banding, so that's what I always use. To keep this cabinet together, I'm going to use some dados, so I'll set up a dado stack in my saw. I can set up a sacrificial fence so that I don't damage my permanent fence. I didn't want the plywood edge to show on the top of the panel, so I offset the blade by the thickness of a piece of my solid edge banding for my top cut. To hold everything together, I'll use some pocket holes. Pocket holes and dados make cabinet assembly extremely fast and really strong. However, I did not want the pocket holes to show on top, so here I just used a countersink to set some screws into the plywood. Before I could move on to assembling the actual stand, I wanted to take everything off the old bandsaw stand. That way I could line up everything and drill all the holes in the proper places, which would be easier to do on the raw pieces of plywood rather than trying to do it once the cabinet was entirely assembled. Here I can cut out a hole for the belt that goes through the table and down to the motor. With all my holes and slots cut, I can move on to the actual assembly of this bandsaw stand. This middle piece, I didn't have a piece of plywood quite big enough, so I ended up making it out of 2, which is just fine for shop furniture. I can attach that last piece of edge banding on the top. I added some CA glue here as well and some activators so that I didn't have to find any crazy way to clamp this on. It also made it so that I could work the piece just about immediately. And I'll plug those couple holes that I drilled on the side. Somebody has got to tell this guy to get his head out from right in front of the camera. I had these 2-inch casters left over from a different project, so they were perfect for this one. And boy, does that roll better than the old stand. The carriage bolts that I originally had for the motor were not quite long enough, so I'm going to have to put some newer ones in there. However, the saw does still work now. I just don't want to run it without bolts that have better thread engagement.
So I'm actually pretty happy with the way this little mobile base stand turned out. I was going to build something a lot simpler, and I kind of had a last minute decision to build a full new stand for this, and I'm happy I did. In the future I will build a drawer for the bottom, but that will be a different one-day build. I don't know when that will come up. Overall, this moves around so much easier than the one before, and the casters all lock if I want to keep it in place. And with that, I'm going to pick my card for next week. And here we go. What do we have? It better be a club. We don't have any clubs yet. 3 of spades. Box joint welding helmet box. I'm excited for this. I wanted to do this one for a while. I hope you enjoyed this week's video, and if you want to stick around and come back next week, there will be a new video up.
Thanks for watching.